InspirED Virtual Learning Series. Welcome to InspirED. As we continue to watch the COVID-19 pandemic evolve in Ohio, this school year looks different for everyone. And that is why InspirED was created by the Ohio Department of Education's Office for Exceptional Children and OCALI. Because you are here with us today, we know that you are interested in expanding your knowledge and capacity through online learning. So we also want you to know about OCALICon Line, the nation's premier autism and disabilities conference. While we usually bring thousands of people together in Columbus, Ohio each year, this year we're doing it all virtually. Registration is open now. We invite you to join us November 11th through 13th. Head over to ocali.org to learn more.
Supporting positive behaviors at school and at home, strategies to help reduce interfering behaviors. Presenters, Amy Bixler-Coffin, MS, Program Director, Autism Center at OCALI. Wendy Zakas, MS, Regional Consultant, Autism Center at OCALI. Bobby Huffman, Intervention Specialist, Upper Arlington School District. Kelly Flanagan, Intervention Specialist, ESCCO.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us. We are excited to connect with you as part of the InspirED Virtual Learning Series. This series is dedicated to providing timely information and resources for professionals and families supporting students, including those with disabilities, in a virtual learning environment. The content of this webinar has been pre-recorded, but we want to encourage your participation. If you have any questions or comments, we invite you to be part of the discussion by using the chat feature. Questions will be answered throughout the webinar and at the end of the session. I'm Amy Bixler-Coffin, and I'm the Autism Center Program Director at OCALI.
And I'm Wendy Zakas, Regional Consultant with the OCALI Autism Center. School's looking very different these days. Some children are attending school in person 5 days a week. Others are participating in a hybrid approach. So they go to the school a few days, and then they go to online instruction a few days at home, and those days may vary week by week. And still others are at home full-time, participating in online instruction. No matter which approach, children are experiencing a different kind of schooling this year. And so are families. And it's hard on everyone, the students, the educators, the family members. So what can we do to help children know what to expect in each of these educational situations? And how can we help not only the kids, but also their family members and teachers? Simple strategies, known as Antecedent-Based Interventions, or ABI, can help. These strategies are evidence-based practices that focus on identifying the conditions in the environment that may be contributing to the occurrence of an interfering behavior, which would be a behavior that we want to try to replace with a more appropriate one. Setting up the environment, whether it be at school or at home, with specific strategies often provides the necessary support that children need in order to be more successful engaging in instruction. The Autism Center is going to be presenting a variety of strategies that can help in increasing a child's ability to engage with school, whether it's at home or in that school building, and can help decrease behaviors that are interfering with that engagement. We're going to talk today about the physical environment, including physical setup of the learning area, and that could be at home or in a school building, and also visual schedules that can be used at home and in classroom environments. So Amy, what should we remember about ABI strategies when we're working with families?
Well, Wendy, we know that before setting up a physical environment and creating schedules, whether it be in the brick and mortar school or on a virtual environment, it is so important for teachers, therapists, and families to communicate regularly and openly with each other. There needs to be reasoning based on assessment behind how we set up those environments and how we design those schedules in a specific way. And those reasons are based upon the child's strengths and the child's needs. They're very much individualized. And having input from the family, the teacher, the therapist, staff members, and even the student at times will allow for a more comprehensive look at setting up the learning environment. We recently had the opportunity to hear from a teacher who's working with families involved in remote learning, Kelly Flanagan. And Kelly is an intervention specialist with the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. She's been working with students with low-incidence disabilities and students on the autism spectrum for the past 3 years. Her passion is to provide her students with meaningful access to meaningful curriculum through multisensory techniques that involve technology. She's currently remotely teaching 5th grade through 12th grade. She loves technology and adapting virtual learning to meet the needs of her students. Here's what Kelly had to say when we talked with her. Kelly, how did you work with families to really help them prepare for their child to participate in remote or virtual learning?
So the biggest tool that I used during remote learning to help support my families was open communication. It was imperative that they knew I was available to help them in any way that I could. And if that meant providing more physical materials when I was able to, or reviewing how to use a platform, I wanted families to know that I was present for them and I wanted their child to succeed. I learned that parents and students needed explicit instruction on how to access the online materials and especially how to submit work. It wasn't enough to simply assign work digitally or send packets home. Parents and students needed to know how to access the curriculum and participate in submitted assignments. So to help families, I held family meetings to discuss what would be sent home and the purposes behind the materials, both physical and digital. I went through each material and explained what we would use them for and why. For example, I had a morning meeting binder for each student that included materials necessary for participating in morning meeting, including handouts and page protectors, so the students could write on them with dry erase markers and reuse them, and regular handouts. I also included their schedule, which was either a checklist or a visual schedule for the students that I was working with. And when appropriate, the student would attend the meeting as well to have the materials reviewed with them too. During my first experience with remote learning, I used a different platform than I do now. But as I learned more about remote learning and discovered different platforms, I found one now that my students can really access and is a lot more streamlined. Front-loading the information was done during family meetings. Again, that's when I met with the families and explained explicitly what the items were meant for and how they would be used and when it would be used. That was also important, so they knew when they came to a specific meeting what materials they would need to participate in that meeting. This was really helpful because families could ask questions about how they needed to use the materials or the technologies, figure out how a day would look, and also become more familiar with me as their teacher. Starting a virtual school year is much different than starting in person, and these families meetings really helped the families to learn what to expect in remote learning in my class.
So Kelly provided a lot of support to families up front, as well as on a regular basis, so that families understood how to help their child while learning in a virtual learning environment. She shared with us that communication is essential. Now let's take a look at a couple examples of home learning environments. First, let's look at how the specific needs of a child were incorporated into the learning area at home, since he's receiving online instruction a few days a week. This kiddo is in 4th grade. He needs a quiet location that incorporates a wiggle stool to allow him for movement while he's engaging in learning. To meet his other sensory needs, he has access to hand fidgets and to a lava lamp, providing calm support. His schedule is located on a whiteboard hanging on the wall next to his desk on the right-hand side so that he can refer to it as needed and so that he can cross off activities that he's already completed. Login passwords and other information to access his lessons online are also on his whiteboard. When it's time to engage in his reading assignments, he can leave his desk area and go to his little reading nook, which consists of a beanbag chair and a weighted blanket, and he can sit there and do his reading activities. But what about when he's attending school 2 to 3 days a week? How did we make things consistent? Well, his teacher worked closely with mom, and his teacher was able to get a wiggle stool for him for school and also created a little fidget box for him at school as well. And so there was consistency with his sensory supports between school and home. Since there are fewer students in the class, the teacher has encouraged the kiddos to bring a beach towel so that they can get out of their seats and lay or sit on the floor to do silent reading and other independent activities, providing them with movement opportunities. She also has a schedule posted so that he and the other students see what they're working on in the AM and then again in the PM. Together, Mom and his teacher have tried to make his school and home learning area as consistent as possible. Wendy, any other examples you might have to share?
Oh, yep, got another one. So maybe you don't have a separate space for a learning area, or you want to be able to keep an eye on your child. So this next example shows using your kitchen table. I know for some children who might need maybe some prompting or some supervision to be able to stay on task, being able to keep a close eye on them would be really helpful. In this case, your child's assignments could be set up in a structured work system, providing your child with the understanding of what to do and in what order. This structured system includes 3 numbered drawers that you'll see over on the left side on the floor that contain whatever work tasks that child needs to do, a work system board with matching numbers posted on the table, and a finish basket where completed tasks are placed, and that's on the table over to the right. This system can keep the environment consistent and predictable. If your child has a work system like this at school, you'd want to try to duplicate it as much as possible at home. Hopefully, as Kelly described doing with her students' families earlier, your school sent you a duplicate work system, or at least a photo of what your child uses at school, so you can make it as close as possible. If not, reach out to your school team. Ask them to take a few pictures of the work system being used at school so there's as much consistency between school and home as possible. Amy?
Great ideas, Wendy. And now let me tell you a little bit about the conversation that we had with Bobby. Bobby is a teacher who is currently working with his own children at home, as well as conducting virtual sessions with his students who are participating in virtual learning. Bobby Huffman is a licensed moderate to intensive intervention specialist for grades K through 12. He's in his 14th year of teaching and has taught students ranging in age from preschool through middle school. He has a master's degree in applied behavior analysis from The Ohio State University. And he currently runs a specialized classroom at Jones Middle School in Upper Arlington School District to support individuals with moderate to intensive behavior needs across all disability types. So, Bobby, due to the pandemic and the closing of schools in March, you had to begin working with your own children at home, including your son who has diverse learning needs. So tell us, how was his workspace designed at home, and why did you design it that way?
Well, the first thing we did was we needed to figure out where he was going to work. And we have a separate office area that has doors. And we wanted to use that room because any noise that's going on bothers him. I mean, any noise. Like, it could just be the littlest noise that bothers him. So that's part of his sensory needs that he has. And also just blocking out any of the visual stimuli that's around the environment. So we just took some real quick wallpaper there and just covered up those windows. It took like 10 minutes, and it was so worth it. And then he had his own little special place to work without all the distractions. When he's in his room, all these things that you see in this picture is purposeful. The natural lighting. He does not like a lot of light. I mean, he wants minimal light. He's a lot of bright light affects his eyes. So we have the natural lighting going on, have the lamps going really low, and we have some timers and things like that for him. And just this picture just really shows what we did to make it comfortable for him.
With that said, what structure did you need to provide for him to really engage in his schoolwork?
Well, the first thing we had to do was develop what's the schedule for the day. What's this day going to look like? Because even though we're at home, it's still going to be school. So for Rocco, it was really important that we establish some predictability. So the first thing was creating an overall schedule. So we made sure and had a consistent wake-up time. He had to get dressed, eat breakfast, brush teeth. These things are all consistent with what we do whenever he is going to school. So, and then after that, we just went through and created his work schedules, set up when he can have some free time, had lunch the same time every day. After lunch, he would, he'd go back to work with his schedules. He'd get free time. And then at the end of the day, maybe like an hour before bed, we would just review what the next day looks like to kind of front load so he would understand what was expected.
That was a great example from Bobby of what his child needed to be successful with remote learning. Here's another example of a home learning area set up. Maybe your child's in middle school and needs a quiet spot to attend those virtual classes. You might set up an area in a separate room, including a desk with all those needed supplies, pencils, laptop, folders, Kleenex, not a lot of distractions. Think about what your child needs and do your best to adjust that environment to meet those needs with input from your child as much as possible. Ask her which way she wants her desk to face, what would help her stay focused, what might be motivating to keep her engaged in her lessons, something she can do after those lessons. Middle school students have the opportunity to move on a regular basis between classes when they're in school. So they're running to their lockers, chatting it up with their friends. We need to keep that in mind when scheduling those classes at home when they're 100% virtual. And families, allow your kiddos the opportunity to get up, to move, to text a friend, to grab a snack, whatever they need to do in between classes so then they can stay focused when it's time. Let's get some more insight from Kelly on what she incorporated into remote learning. Kelly, how did you build in virtual breaks to your virtual classroom?
My breaks varied from student to student. So some of my students are able to work for almost an hour where they earn their reward at the end, whereas other students worked in such as 15-minute chunks. I definitely just differentiate the breaks based on what the student needs. And I also pay attention to how the student is acting during our sessions. And if they need a break when they would normally need one, I provide them those as well.
So part of that differentiation, how are you meeting those sensory needs of your students in that virtual environment while they're at their homes when those built-in breaks maybe aren't enough?
Right. That definitely can be the case. So each student was provided with sensory materials, including a variety of fidgets, such as Play-Doh and stretchy bands. I encouraged my students to use them whenever they needed to. We also incorporated mindfulness breathing and actively asking for a break if they needed it. I wanted my students to pay attention to their own emotions and their own work, and if they needed to take a break, to ask for one. Additionally, I built in breaks into longer meetings, such as our morning meeting. For example, we would work for a set amount of time, and then I would play a video that would encourage movement, especially. It was great for all of us to stand up and move, so we're not only sitting in front of a computer. I definitely watched my students' demeanor, and I would start a break earlier if it was needed, and I would include multiple breaks in the meeting if we needed it. My students' sensory needs were generally met through the movement breaks for vestibular input, as well as the tactile input of the various provided sensory tools and fidgets. If a student, if their needs were not being met, I would have worked with the family on a sensory diet that would meet the student's needs, however.
Those were great ideas from Kelly on how to support student sensory systems and provide movement. We have one more example of how a family used the space that they had to incorporate a home learning area. It could be that you have a small space for your child's learning area with lots of school stuff that your child needs and uses, like this mom's has set up. There's a desk with lots of backlight surrounded by boxes, papers, tapes, and other materials needed for that child to be engaged. If it works for your child, it's all good. The key here is to identify what's needed for your child to find success in learning at home or at school. Perfection is not needed, just function. Now let's go back to Bobby and hear from him again about setting up learning areas. So, Bobby, how have you worked with families to help them know how to set up that learning area for their child at home? So when you're going to work with them, they're going to get focused, and it's based on the strengths and the needs of their child.
Sure. Well, all of my students, they need their own workplace that's free of distractions, because the distractions will often dysregulate their emotions. So I've taken pictures of my area and I've shared my successes that I've done through picture examples, through our conversations. If they ask for work samples, I provided that, the schedules and everything, the visuals, all the visuals I've used. I discussed the importance of establishing shared control with their child to decide which activities go on each schedule. And shared control is really a really important concept, to where the expectations are given, and you and the child can work together to establish what those expectations will look like, but you're still meeting the overall goal. So for example, let's say the student has 6 activities to do that day. Well, you can establish shared control if you let the child decide what order they go in. You're not letting them get out of anything. You're just saying, hey, well, what do you want to do first? And what do you want to do second? And then you let them have some control of that schedule. And then after all that is established, I've talked a lot about delaying reinforcement. So what that means is, instead of letting your child wake up and start watching TV, or instead of letting the children get up and play video games, you reserve that activity, or you delay that until after they've met the expectations that you need them to meet. And more importantly, you really save those really highly preferred activities for the child to do after they do the task that's really hard for them. So maybe getting through their work schedule is really hard. So make sure you say, well, hey, you can do video games, or you can play on your computer as soon as you get that work schedule done.
That was excellent advice for families from Bobby. Amy, are we ready to move on to using visual supports in learning areas?
Absolutely, Wendy. Let's talk a little bit about using visual supports to support engagement in a learning area. We know that visual supports are super helpful for showing students what to do. For instance, in the picture on the left, the teacher has colored dots on the carpet to show where a student can sit. Now, keep in mind, we're in a pandemic. Those dots need to be spread apart, 6 feet apart, socially distanced, but you get the point here. Those dots represent where the kiddos sit, provide structure and visual for them to know what's expected of them. You also see in this picture footprints on the floor, and these footprints can be in the classroom, in the hallway, in the bathroom. They can help with lining up. Again, socially distanced recommended by your health department, but keeping in mind visual supports can save time and help kids be ready to engage with learning and reduce those interfering behaviors because they know what is expected of them. You might also need to set up some work areas for students who may need one-to-one instruction or who may be easily distracted. On the left is a one-to-one work area using shelves to limit distractions with 2 desks and 2 chairs set up. So the student and the teacher are across from each other, again, socially distanced. The picture on the right shows an independent work area with work tasks on the left on the shelf, the desk area in the center, and then a finished basket on the right. See the similarities in this work system from what Wendy was talking about earlier? However, this one uses animals, since this is what the student's area of interest is. We want to build in those interests to motivate the child. Notice that other shelves are covered with material to indicate those materials are not for us right now. We're not using those. This particular setup assisted students with autism to have the structure needed to participate as independently as possible. Bobby shared this information when we talked to him, so let's go back and listen to Bobby as he addressed structure in a virtual school setting. So we talked about how structure can look in a brick and mortar environment, Bobby. How have you structured your virtual classroom? Because you're not only working with kiddos at home, your own children, but you're also working with students now in a virtual mode. And so how did you structure your virtual classroom in order to help them engage in learning?
Well, when students enter my virtual classroom, I also have a schedule posted that I show them by sharing my screen. Other times, if I'm working more one-on-one, I may set a timer and say, hey, we're going to work for this amount of time. Depending on the needs of the student, I may stop the timer if the student gets off task, and then the student may wonder what's going on. And then when it gets back on task, I turn the timer on, and then I teach them that when they're on task that the timer goes, so because they want to be able to get done. So that kind of teaches on-task behavior. I also allow the last 10 minutes of class is reserved for time for them to earn preferred time for working and earning tokens or whatever it is they're working for. I also try to only assess what's necessary. So for my students, writing can be really tough, especially if you're doing it virtually. So I'll often have the activity pulled up on my screen, and I will scribe their responses to eliminate some of the steps that often impede on their performance. I also utilize breakout rooms when I have several students, which has been very, very nice. They get their own tasks and they get their own breakout rooms with a schedule, and I'll just randomly pop in and out of the room, and they know that I'm going to pop in, and I establish that in the beginning. And I just let them know, hey, when I pop in your room, I just want to see what kind of progress you're making. And then when they can demonstrate by sharing their screen that they are making progress, then I'll have a token that I'll put in their jar or something. I'll let them see that they earn for being on task. And then those tokens are what they exchange for free time at the end of class.
So Bobby definitely considered the specific needs of each of his students when designing his virtual classroom. Now, if you're interested in learning more about how to set up your learning areas, visit OCALI's Autism Internet modules. You can visit the Antecedent-Based Interventions and the Structured Teaching.
So we've talked about some structure for the environment. Now let's talk about our second ABI strategy, using visual schedules, incorporating reinforcers and special interests. The visual support that was most valuable to my students in the classroom is a visual schedule. People in general, and especially people with autism, really like the world to be as predictable and consistent as possible. And these days, that's really can be a challenge, but the visual schedule can really help. It shows a person what's happening across a period of time and can help with transitioning from one activity to another. We can help that even further by incorporating highly preferred activities and interests to support engagement to help make more sense of that learning environment. I've seen the anxiety of students drop dramatically once they understand what that schedule's telling them and how it works. We got to talk to Bobby about schedules. Can you tell us what type of visual schedules you use with your students so that they know kind of like what's expected of them as you're moving through class time? And then within those schedules, how did you build in reinforcement or maybe what their special interests are?
So I have a few different examples I can share. So this is a work schedule that I will provide for my students that are readers and that can read very well. So here you'll see that I have the task, I have the subject and the task that they're going to work on. And then you can see the next column is the completed box. Whenever they have completed it based off what was expected, they'll check the box. And then when they've done that, they will come to me and say, I completed my task. And then I will say, okay, let me check it. And if I agree, then I will put a check. And then 2 checks is what means that the activity is done. And then I'll throw in a couple gummies as well.
So what if you didn't agree they were done? How do you deal with that with the kids, especially when you're virtual? I'm sure you have to be gentle.
Yeah. It's tough, but really, it's just about telling them, hey, listen, share your screen with me, and then that has to be taught in the beginning, how to share a screen. And then once we go through, if it's something that they just rushed, then I'll just help them through it. I mean, there's only so much that you can do, but if I see that they did most of it or what I really, really want them to do, then I'll say, okay, hey, try this, and I'll try to, and they'll get their check, and then we'll move on. Okay. So depending on the needs of the student.
Those are excellent examples from Bobby. Amy, do you have some more examples to share?
Sure do. Here's another example of using a visual schedule. On the left, you are looking at a schedule for a kiddo attending school at home 2 to 3 days a week. Included on the whiteboard in the middle is a calendar that shows what days of the week he will be at school and what days of the week he will be at home receiving his education. On the left side is his at-home schedule. This is a half-day schedule, so his mom included his morning schedule up to lunch. While he's eating lunch, she writes down his afternoon schedule. She remembers to build in breaks and also try to include a reinforcing activity after more demanding or less preferred activities. On the right side of the whiteboard is a place where she can put his passwords and documents from school needed for the day. The image on the right is a whiteboard schedule used with an older teen. Her schedule includes motivating activities and things that are building her vocational capabilities based on her interests. What do you have to share with us, Wen?
Well, sometimes all a child can handle is, what do I have to do right now? And then what's next? We can show this in a first-then schedule. A first-then schedule works best when the first is something the person needs to complete, the then is something the person will love to do. Reinforcement at its best. On the left, you can see a wipe-off board was used to show a child first he had to do his journal writing, and then he could watch some TV. And you could even use a timer to show the length of time to spend on each of those activities. On the right is a schedule that uses picture and word cards along with a finished envelope. So the child can remove the schedule card when that activity is finished and place it in the envelope. This is for a child who can handle a few activities at a time. Hopefully, your school team can help you with what schedule format will work best with your child, and maybe they'll even send you your cards or pictures to use if they haven't done that already for your child.
Students may need other types of visual schedules, though. Some students may need an object schedule set up with objects to represent each activity of the day. In the image on the left, the objects have been attached to icon word cards to start transitioning the student to the icons. Objects and icons representing music, play, bathroom, and art are included. On the right is a schedule with icons representing the teacher table, work alone, snack, wash hands. But these are paper clipped to the board since the hook and loop tape was a sensory issue for the student. Each schedule is made to meet the needs of the individual student, as Kelly shared. So, Wendy, we have covered a lot of information in a short period of time. So where can we get more information about these strategies? Well, visit the OCALI Autism Internet modules available that have information on antecedent-based interventions, schedules, visual support, structured teaching, structured work systems. There's a lot of modules at your fingertips. There's also a first-then template in the Autism Center Resource Gallery of Interventions on the Autism Center webpage. Thanks for participating in today's webinar. We've provided a link in the chat to a brief survey, and we'll also follow up by email with the same link and additional information about this series. This series is for you, and we welcome any feedback. By completing the survey, you'll be able to access a certificate verifying your attendance in this webinar. This recording and related resources will be available on demand through our website at ocali.org. There, you'll also find upcoming and past episodes of InspirED, and you can keep the conversation going on social media at OCALI Official and by using hashtag InspirEdOhio. As we move forward together in virtual learning, our connections help to inspire success.
InspirED, Virtual Learning Series.